The colony ship Wanderer's Hope drifted silently through the cold darkness of space. Inside its metal walls, 12,000 humans slept in frozen chambers, unaware that the galaxy had already forgotten them. 300 years ago, the Galactic Council had decided their fate. Humanity was too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to remain among the civilized species. The Council had voted unanimously. Every alien race agreed. Humans needed to disappear. They did not choose death. That would have been too cruel, even for beings who feared humanity. Instead, they chose exile. The Council loaded humans onto old ships and sent them to the farthest edge of known space. They sent them to a region called the Dead Zone, a place where no intelligent species had ever survived. The stars there were dying. The planets were barren. Resources were scarce. The Council believed nature would finish what they could not bring themselves to do. Captain woke first. The ship's emergency systems had pulled her from because something had gone wrong. She floated through the dark corridors, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. The ship's power was failing. They had maybe 6 months of energy left. She checked the navigation computer and found they had arrived at their destination. A small, gray planet orbited a weak red sun. This was their new home. This was where humanity would either live or die. Woke the other leaders next. There was Doctor, the chief scientist. There was Commander James, head of security. There was Maria Santos, the agricultural specialist. Together, they looked at the planet through the ship's damaged sensors. What they saw did not give them hope. The atmosphere was thin but breathable. The surface was mostly rock and dust. There was water, but it was frozen deep underground. Temperatures dropped to deadly levels at night. No trees grew there. No animals walked its surface. It was a dead world. "They sent us here to die," James said quietly. His voice carried no anger, only acceptance of the truth. Nodded slowly. "Then we will have to disappoint them." The awakening took 3 months. They brought people out in small groups, giving each group time to understand their situation. Some cried, some screamed, some fell into silence that lasted days, but slowly something changed. The fear transformed into determination. The despair became anger, and that anger became fuel for survival. They named the planet Rebirth. It was a promise they made to themselves and to their children. The first year was the hardest. They lost 400 people to the cold, to accidents, to a sickness that spread through the underground shelters they had built. Every death was felt deeply. Every funeral was attended by thousands. They carved names into stone walls so no one would be forgotten. But for every person who fell, 10 more stood up to take their place. Humans had always been stubborn. Now, that stubbornness kept them alive. Doctor worked without rest. He studied the planet's soil and found minerals that could be processed into building materials. He discovered bacteria living deep underground that could be modified to produce oxygen. He created new crops that could grow in low light and poor soil. Each discovery was small, but together they added up to survival. Maria Santos turned those discoveries into reality. She built underground farms that stretched for kilometers. She developed water collection systems that pulled moisture from the thin air. She trained hundreds of people to become farmers in a world where nothing had ever grown before. Within 5 years, they had enough food to feed everyone. Within 10 years, they had surplus. Commander kept them safe. Not from aliens, for none ever came to the dead zone. He kept them safe from themselves. In times of desperation, people sometimes turn on each other. He made sure that never happened. He created laws that were fair. He trained peacekeepers who used words before weapons. He built a justice system based on rehabilitation, not punishment. Under his watch, Rebirth became a place where disputes were settled with conversation, not violence. Captain led them all. She did not demand obedience. She earned respect. She worked alongside the miners who dug tunnels through frozen rock. She ate the same simple meals as everyone else. She listened to complaints and suggestions alike. When times were darkest, she reminded them of who they were. Humans had survived ice ages. Humans had crossed oceans in wooden boats. Humans had walked on other worlds. They would survive this too. 20 years passed. The underground cities grew larger and more complex. They had schools now, teaching children who had never known Earth. They had hospitals with doctors who had learned to treat diseases that only existed on rebirth. They had factories producing everything from clothing to computers. They had artists painting murals on tunnel walls and musicians composing songs about their new home. Life was hard, but it was life. Then the scientists made a discovery that changed everything. Deep beneath the planet's surface, they found something impossible. There was a network of caves filled with crystals that pulsed with strange energy. These crystals could store enormous amounts of power. They could be refined into fuel that was 100 times more efficient than anything humanity had ever used. Doctor called them Phoenix Stones because they would allow humanity to rise from the ashes. The discovery sparked a new era. With unlimited energy, they could do things that had seemed impossible before. They built massive heating systems that made the surface habitable. They constructed domes that could hold entire forests. They launched satellites that mapped their world and the space around it. They built ships that could travel to other planets in their small solar system. 50 years after their exile, the people of Rebirth had created something remarkable. They had built a civilization from nothing. They had turned a dead world into a home, and they had done it alone, without help from the galaxy that had abandoned them. Did not live to see it all. She died at the age of 82, surrounded by her children, and her last words were simple. "Look how far we have come. Look how far we will go." They buried her on the surface, under a dome filled with flowers that had never existed before she arrived. A statue stood above her grave, showing her looking toward the stars. New leaders rose. New generations grew. The children of Rebirth did not feel the pain of exile as their parents had. They knew only this world and they loved it. But they also looked up at the night sky and wondered, what had become of the galaxy that had thrown them away? Did the alien races even remember that humans existed? 100 years after exile, they found out. A ship appeared at the edge of their system. It was alien, belonging to one of the races that had voted for humanity's exile. They had come to check on their prisoners, expecting to find either corpses or primitive survivors barely clinging to life. What they found instead left them speechless. The humans greeted them not with weapons, but with words. They invited the ambassador to visit Rebirth. They showed him cities that rivaled anything in the Galactic Council. They showed him technology that made the aliens' eyes go wide. The Phoenix Stones had allowed humans to advance at a pace no one had predicted. In a century of isolation, they had caught up to civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. The ambassador returned to the council with a message. The humans were alive. The humans were thriving. The humans wanted to talk. The council did not know what to do. Some wanted to send warships to destroy this unexpected threat. Others argued that attacking would only prove the humans right about alien cruelty. In the end, they agreed to send diplomats. They wanted to see these new humans for themselves. The delegation arrived expecting barbarians. They found philosophers. They expected violence. They found patience. The humans did not scream or threaten. They did not demand revenge or reparation. They simply told their story. They described the struggles and the triumphs. They showed what could be built when people worked together against impossible odds. They asked only one thing. They wanted to rejoin galactic society, not as subordinates or as conquerors, but as equals. The council debated for months. Old fears ran deep, but the evidence was undeniable. Humanity had changed during their exile. They had faced extinction and chosen cooperation over conflict. They had built a society based on fairness and hard work. They had taken the worst punishment the galaxy could offer and transformed it into strength. One by one, the races voted. Some said yes immediately. Others took longer to decide. But in the end, the vote was unanimous, just as it had been a century before. This time, however, the decision was different. Humanity would be welcomed back. The day the announcement reached Rebirth was a day of celebration. People danced in the streets of their underground cities and in the domed gardens on the surface. They laughed and cried and held each other close. They had won, not through war or conquest, but through sheer determination to survive. But even as they celebrated, they remembered. They remembered the 400 who died in the first year. They remembered Captain and all the others who had sacrificed so much. They remembered that they had been thrown away like garbage, left to die in the darkest corner of space. Forgiveness would come eventually, but forgetting was impossible. The original exiles built a monument at the center of their capital city. It was a massive structure showing humans climbing out of darkness toward light. At its base, they carved words in every human language that still existed. They cast us into the void. We built a home in the darkness. They forgot us. We remembered who we were. They wanted us to die. We chose to live. We are humanity. We endure. Ships from Rebirth began traveling to other worlds. Humans met aliens who had never seen their kind, who knew them only from stories and warnings. These new encounters were sometimes difficult, but the humans from Rebirth approached them with patience. They had learned that anger was a fire that burned out quickly, but determination was a flame that could last forever. New colonies spread across the dead zone, transforming barren worlds into gardens. Humanity did not seek to dominate or control. They sought to build and grow. Other species watched in amazement as the exiles turned wasteland after wasteland into thriving settlements. Some began to wonder if the Council had been wrong all those centuries ago. Some began to wonder what else humanity might accomplish if given the chance. The children of Rebirth looked at the stars with different eyes than their ancestors had. They did not see enemies waiting to destroy them. They did not see judges who had condemned them unfairly. They saw possibilities. They saw futures that had not yet been written. They saw a galaxy vast and strange and full of wonder, waiting to be explored. And somewhere in the quiet of space, the spirits of those first exiles watched over them. James, Maria Santos, and all the others who had turned despair into hope. Their bodies were gone, but their legacy lived on in every human who walked the streets of Rebirth, in every ship that carried their descendants to new worlds, in every moment of connection between humans and aliens who were slowly becoming friends. The galaxy had tried to erase humanity. Instead, it had only made them stronger. From exile and abandonment, from death and despair, a new world had risen from the ashes, and it was only the beginning.